Hey, welcome to Creatacast with your host, David Welch. Today is kind of a take it easy day. I was originally going to go on with a full feature-length show with readings and stuff for different submissions, but I lost the submissions that I had, and I was unable to get them back. I tried getting into that email, didn't work. I tried working with Google to get into that email that I thought I set up, but apparently they can't find it either, so it's okay. We're going to move forward. Setbacks happen. Totally understand that. But this is the season of forgiveness. It's hard to live in a season of forgiveness without putting some pen to paper or putting your thoughts down on paper and really understanding why you're forgiving who you're going to forgive and what the holidays mean to you, right? Part of my creative writing journey started off with Christmas movies. I don't think I was really interested in writing until I started watching movies like Home Alone and, Goonies and other movies that take place around Christmas, like, The Nightmare Before Christmas, both Halloween / Christmas, Scrooge, The Santa Claus, love that film, Polar Express. I mean, the list goes on. There's some great holiday films. I grew up watching a lot of films, even on Netflix right now. If you haven't seen the new Kurt Russell Christmas movie, oh my goodness, you are missing a treat. Please, please, please watch that film if you have not. But I originally fell in love with film, the whole idea of film and somebody's creative being created that. But then as I got older, and I started getting into reading, it was really the understanding that writing and literature and books created or helped precipitate what ends up on film ultimately, because a lot of the influences are drawn from literature, drawn from books, and drawn from great teachers like Joseph Campbell, who was a masterful lecturer. He was one person that lived that to this day I could listen for hours. So brilliant. If you get a chance, watch The Power of Myth with Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyer, not Maurer, Moyer. And it's on YouTube. You can watch every episode. It's amazing. But going back to what really kicked off my love of reading, of course, I'm going to go back to my foundation. Third grade really was a trendsetter for me. It was the first time I read Hatchet and Jack London's White Fang. And those two books really turned the tables for me. And then I read, of course, the Brian books that followed with Gary Paulson. And those were just books that I related to. I was living in the Northwest. I was living in Idaho. So, I felt, man, I could be lost out in the woods with a hatchet. And, how would I survive? And I was in Scouts at the time, too. So it was one of those things where, in my head, I could take on the world. And then we had films that really gave agency to youngsters. I grew up in a time where Kevin from Home Alone was taking on bad guys. The Three Ninjas, Surf Ninjas, and youngsters really taking on the world and fighting bad guys and all that. So, for me, growing up reading, that was really one of those things where I felt very in tune and very capable of achieving things based on things that I had read, And one of the books I really wish I read when I was younger was Bridge to Terabithia. I didn't read that until I was already an adult, and I had heard of the book, never had a chance to really dig in and read it. And of course, like, when I was in high school, Harry Potter was huge. It was like it was an eruption into the scene. And I honestly believe J.K. Rowling realigned literacy across the world, like made reading super fun. But prior to her, I mean, reading, there was definitely a lull. I mean, yes, we did have the Goosebump era, which really dominated a huge majority of the 90s. And then we had a few offshoots, different young adult literature novels. Ender's Game really was awesome for me when I was in junior high. So all of these uh, things that are just really taking off for me and really going in that direction when I was younger was huge. Those are the books that really lit up my life. And I think it was ninth grade. I think I was just so overwhelmed with what we were reading in school. I mean, we were reading Shakespeare. I read all the plays, got really into it. I was reading Dean R. Koontz like a lot. I was reading a lot of Dean Koontz books. But what really started my writing journey, and having that belief system that I could write something, was Connie Golden's Emperor series. It was a historical fiction series that kicked off like a huge reading journey of mine while I was in the military. That book, Emperor Rise to Rome, single-handedly brought forth a monsoon of reading. Like, it was at that moment when I read that book and I was able to follow, Gaius Julius Caesar and Marcus Brutus all the way to, young adulthood and really get into the nitty-gritty of historical fiction. It set off a monsoon. It was like, oh, damn, I was reading everything. I was reading Michael Curtis Ford's The 10,000, The Last King, Sword of Attila. I mean, these books are just amazing. If you haven't picked them up, oh my goodness, you love historical fiction, ancient Greece and Rome, get into those books. Wow, amazing. Simon Scarrow, William Dietrich, all these, really powerhouses in historical fiction. They set the tone. They really did. And then, of course, I was like, I can't just limit myself to reading historical fiction. I got to branch out. So I got back into Ender's Game. I read the whole series, read Speaker for the Dead. And I'm all the way up to, like, I've read Ender in Exile. I know I need to read Shadows in Flight. I get it, people. Oh, you can't say you're a true fan unless you've read them all, but I know I'm still catching up. But I think I had a reignition into young adult literature when I was in the military too, and I was also getting into the Predator Alien, novels. Those are fantastic for me. So it was really a turning point. And the first time I really took a crack at writing a novel, and this was like 2008, I was getting out of the Navy. I wanted to write a Predator book. And to this day, I still have like 55 pages. I'm 55 pages into it. Like I've written quite a bit into it. And right now it's just like this huge fan fiction that I'm working on until I can get it like into the universe. That's the ultimate goal. I mean, honestly, that's when I really started writing. Did I put that project on the back burner to focus on other things, other writing? Yes. Because the feedback I was getting as a writer was, damn, you tense jump, you got to work on dialogue, you got to, you have great with imagery, and then you slack off, and, your settings are all kind of awkward. So I realized at that point that I really needed a writing education. So, in turn, I went to Arizona State, and that's what led me there. And Arizona State has a great MFA program, creative writing program, and just English department in general. The College of Liberal Arts and Sciences is just fantastic there. And I think it was really there that I really dug my heels into poetry. I wasn't a big, I was a poet naturally in high school, and I wrote poetry, but my understanding and concept of poetry was, rhyme scheme, iambic pentameter, and it was really kind of narrowed. And then once I got into college, it was like, wow, there's more to poetry, and it's a bigger community than I had ever dreamed it to be. So I never really, swung that full baseball bat into poetry all the way up until college. And that was, like I said, circa 2008. And, books in college that kept me going. Of course, I read the entire, and I was huge into young adult literature because I was gleaning more towards that direction as a writer. So I read, even, children's lit. I read, Peter and the Starcatchers, the whole Peter series there. I read, Sebastian Dark series. All of them are just amazing. If you ever need recommendations on young adult literature or children's lit, just let me know. I can probably send you a fat list of books that are just amazing. If you have a young girl in the household who wants to read a female protagonist that goes through the ringer and really embraces a lot of turmoil, and it's also a tidbit of historical fiction, which is what drew me to the series. But the Bloody Jack series by Lewis Myers, just amazing, amazing series. I fell in love with the series. I even got my coworkers to read it. So, I mean, that journey into writing started with reading, and it started with Gary Paulson. It started with reading Holes. I read Goose, R.L. Stine. I read damn near the whole series. I was like really into those books, and then I didn't start reading like Stephen King or Anne Rice until I was already an adult. Ironically enough, I read Twilight in a book bin of new books we got on the ship's library. So we got a new bin of books, and I just happened to pick it up and read it. And I thought it was all right at the time. Definitely, it didn't really pique my interest. And then the movie craze happened, and I laud the fact that she stuck to her guns and wrote the whole series, and it turned into what it was. And I like that. So what I guess I'm trying to go after with this show is, you writers out there, what got you to really start writing? I mean, what books led up to that idea, that one epiphany you had that said, I can do this. I can write. I can produce. I can create. Because for me, I'd always been, I journaled in high school. Like, I was a journaler, I journaled ever since fucking Dances with Wolves. For some reason, the idea of journaling was romantic to me. And then Cruel Intentions. Lord help that movie. I was so freaking melodramatic in high school because of that movie. I'll tell you what, it was like in junior high when I saw that, but I loved it because it's like, I want to keep me a diary. Watch. And I did. I kept a few diaries. I kept a few notebooks and things like that. And I've transcribed a lot of things, a lot of poetry. It's on poetrysoup.com. And if you go on poetrysoup.com and you look up David M. Welch, which is me, there is a David A. Welch, or L.A. or L, I can't remember. But there's a lot of David Welches that are authors out there. One writes like sci-fi, the other one writes historical fiction stuff. So there's a couple authors that are David Welch. Me, obviously I'm the best. Just kidding. I love all the David Welches. I've actually emailed them too, or spoken to them on different social media platforms, and they're characters too. It's a great journey to be in league with so many people that are just awesome at writing. But that's what I'm wondering. I mean, it started off really, films really got me into that whole, I want to start writing movie scripts, but that's why I think writing for me is so awesome, because you can write and you can push your work into different platforms, into different areas. You're not really relegated to just being a novelist. You're not relegated to being a poet, or, your title is author. So that means that you can delve wherever you want to. For example, I love you, John Shirley. I'm a huge fan of his. He's written, he's had his hand in movie scripts and television series and, he wrote Predator Forever Midnight, one of my all-time favorite Predator books. And he's just a masterful author. You can really get into his stuff. I'm talking, that and William Dietrich too. Very big fan of his. He's written the Hadrian's Wall, the Ethan Gage novels. If you haven't read those either, and you're into historical fiction, get into those. Those are freaking amazing. But I will be honest with you guys. As far as a reader, in the last year or so, I haven't been the best reader. Something fell off for me. And I have been doing more writing, but I've been doing more reading like on a shorter scale, I think. I've read like a couple young adult novels. I've read I thought the Beauty and the Beast kind of sub-story, in a book was amazing. That was a great book. I loved it, by Donnelly, I believe. But something in the last, I'd say, year or two trailed me off from reading like a chapter a night. Like that was my discipline, and I lost my discipline, and I need to get my discipline black. Wow, I just messed that up. Back. The word is back. I don't know why I said black. I was looking at this black poster that I have, and then, word switched, but back, I'm getting back into reading, and it's refreshing. Like once you get through, the first couple chapters, just like riding a bike, you're like, damn, I missed this. And then, that ever so gratifying feeling of closing a book that you've read entirely and just being in love with that book that you want to share with people. Like, have you read this? If you have not read this, I recommend it. Like, that is the best feeling in the world for an author. They don't even feel that directly. Indirectly, they feel that because their book starts getting passed around and talked about. And I love that. The book I've read most recently, one of the books I've read most recently is, it's a nonfiction book. Suzette Howe's, Broken Before Battle. Wow. You want to talk about a very powerful piece of nonfiction? And I'm not the biggest nonfiction reader. Believe me, I've read like friggin' Seabiscuit, Unbroken, and Broken Before Battle. Those are the three books that I've read that are truly nonfiction pieces that I loved, right? Because, like Suzette Howe's book, you really get into the fighters. You get into why they fight. And I don't think it's like an unprecedented book. It's never really been done. You've always had these kind of memoirs of fighters and these biographies, but you've never really had a living testimony of these fighter stories that are put in a really well articulated and paced book. It's just beautiful. If you ever get a chance to get that book, please pick that up. If you love the sport of MMA, or you're a wrestler and you really want to, kind of get into the nitty gritty of, what it takes and what gets people there, dig into that, find out. I mean, their stories are probably so similar to yours that you don't even know. You're like, damn, like that's like my life. So, it's one of those things. It's one of those things. Get into that book, love it. And that's the one thing I'm going to recommit to you. I want to recommit to my audience. I want to get back into the nitty gritty of reading again and, consuming books. I just love them, like really dive in. And my sister-in-law, bless her soul, she is an avid reader. She's a very talented, writer as well. And, I believe, like, if you want to talk books, she is probably like, she's read enough to definitely be a master's student, but she just hasn't gotten to that point yet. But if she never does, get to that point, that's okay too. Not everybody's an academic. To be an academic is a different type of writing. It's a very fastidious, very analytic type of writing that you do. Even if you're writing like MLA papers, it can be mentally exhausting and tedious to really get into that. But, for me, it's just another challenge on the echelon of writing. So, Your first challenge, folks, when you get out of high school, oftentimes is college. And if you don't fall in love with aligning to the mechanics of writing MLA, APA, different style papers, and really being able to knock those out fairly easily, then your future as a writer is definitely going to be in flux, because it's part of the narrative a lot of the times for those who really get into writing as a profession. A lot of them are college educated now, but not everybody. Not everybody has to be a college educated person to be a writer. But you definitely want to be able to mitigate a lot of the edits that editors are going to go through and rip apart in your book anyway. So to shorten the distance to the goal when it comes to publishing your work, that may be a stepping stone or a helpful stepping stone to get you ultimately to where you want to go. Plus, the people and experiences you have in college are so valuable as a writer that it almost becomes a part. It's just like an intimate part of the process, because without those experiences in college, without reading books that even if you're forced to read the book you wouldn't normally have picked up off the shelf, and you find it rewarding, you find it gratifying, and you really get into a new author like me in college, I would have never read Cormac McCarthy had I not been forced to read Blood Meridian and All the Pretty Horses and what was the other book he made us read? The Road. Without reading those books or being told to read those in college, I would have never freaking read them. No way. It didn't look interesting. I was just like, well, okay, post-apocalyptic, but there's no guns and glory like Mad Max. That's what I want, But, it's okay. It's okay. I saw All the Pretty Horses as a kid, so I was just like, okay, well, I remember that, but, I didn't really get into them until college. And then I read, Douglas Adams, really got into him. Wasn't even a fan of his when Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy came out. I was like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? But it's okay. I love his style. He's so heady, so intelligent with what he writes. It's amazing. And if you don't get a chance to get into his books and you can't really find the cadence, it's okay. Give yourself a few years in college and go back, and you're going to love him. Because you'll understand Schrodinger's cat. You'll understand, all these different allusions and references that he makes in his work, and you'll land on every one of them. You're not going to not understand it. Whereas going into it without the knowledge that you can glean from school, you really miss a lot of the art that goes into his writing. A lot of people are trying to find that niche in writing. Mine, I don't know. That's what I think is why I produced a book of short fiction, and I've written a poetry book, which I've been falling in love again with poetry. Like, ever since was forced to write a sestina in my MFA program, hell, I've been on a poetry writing kick, and I'm going to have my other book out at the end of end of January. So it's going to be called Our Streaming Lives, or My Streaming Life, actually. It's going to be called My Streaming Life. And it's all about watching Netflix and Hulu and getting into different shows. And, I do poetry, kind of like an homage to different shows and programs that I've watched. So that is coming out. I'm working on my novel Linked. I am short on my writing where I need to be for that to publish, here in the next couple months, which is my intention. I really need to step up my game as a writer myself. One of the things that I think is part of my writer's block, which ironically enough is a manifestation of my own ego. And it's also very telling of how I am in my process of writing, because for some reason, I'll get knee deep into a project and then turn around and walk the other way. I don't know why I do that. And I usually have it in my head, the entire story, front to end, before I ever put pen to paper, before I even write notes about it. So it's like, I know how it's going to conclude. Why not just finish the project? And you're thinking, well, gee, how come you don't do it? Other people can, but, I'm just saying that the journey of being a writer, is a process. It can be a long process. It could be the books you've read that get you to that point. It could be the films you've watched. It could be the first writing gig you ever get, even if it's a technical writer. It could be, just something that you enjoy doing at home on the weekends. Like, for some people just make it a habit to write, a couple thousand words a day, or they write their blog and they just, there are people that are truly amazing. And then you're like, oh man, that person released, book after book, year after year. You don't know they've been working on the book for 10 friggin' years. You have no idea how long people have been working on projects, or it's been a project of theirs in the back burner for so long, and it finally gets out. And I now understand why, as a writer, because you can't pick up and knock down every project you go into 100%. And I'm not saying you as in you, I'm saying me as a writer, or you as in me as a writer, right? So some writers are right on par with what I'm talking about. Some writers are like, no, I start and finish everything I do. And if you do, fantastic, But make sure, as a writer, you get workshopped and read and consumed, and you find your cadence, your voice, the way you do your setting, the way you go into your story. Because all of that comes with really getting into your craft. The craft of writing is like wrestling or jiu-jitsu. It's a balance of, pulling and pushing different types of pressure, and finally hitting that 5-point throw when you really get into it. And if you don't know what I mean by a 5-point throw, it's essentially a body slam, or a very nice scenic headlock, if there's a term for it. So just think about the most beautiful throw you've ever seen in your life, another human being do to another. And that's how it feels when you've penned a really solid chapter, or a really solid ending to a play or a skit, or a piece that you're writing, whether it's a poem, and sometimes as a writer, you have to remember that it's okay to walk away for a bit. Walking away for a long time, not so good. Walking away for a bit, because we have a very sedentary sport, right? So, in order to really reduce the idea of the writer that's just really unhealthy, because we do fall into that category of unhealthy professions, because we're sitting at our desk and we're writing. We're writing this, great novel. We're researching. We do a lot of sitting. If you have a standing desk, great on you. Awesome. Get it. And keep doing that. Me, I don't. I have a sitting desk. I have my gaming chair. I've got my hookup. I really do. And I love it. And it works for me. I love my desk. It's a good writer's desk, and it just keeps me in the zone. I love having an office. So when, my wife and we move back to Arizona, we're really going to look for a house so I can have an office again, because having an office really changed my whole landscape of writing. Because before, the dining room table ended up always being my office, and that was just kind of, I don't know, like I couldn't make it my own. But having my own writing space was just night and day difference. I was able to produce more. I was able to finalize projects. I was able to put up my vision board and do, set up my action figures to where, I just make it mine. And it's all about how you create your writing space. Now, some people's writing space is out in nature, and I love that with people, because some people can sit in a coffee shop and pen a novel. I'm not that well talented. To be fair, I have written quite a few short stories in coffee shops, but the Village Inn in Arizona has always been my favorite place to write. Just enough background commotion and noise, and you get pie. So that to me, I was, gained a lot of weight in college, lost a lot of weight in college. It was one of those things. Now, the mantra of the drinking writer. Oh man, every writer's got to have that chilled ice whiskey or vodka or whatever it is they drink, whatever their brand is. They got to have that close by. And for me, that's not a thing. Like, I don't drink, so it's like I guess I'm like an unconventional writer in that sort. But and that's okay. You don't have to fall into the chain smoking / drinking pseudo writer. You don't have to you don't have to go back to being a beatnik. I mean, there's nothing that says that you have to have a certain image to be a writer. You could be the most bubbly person in the world and still be a kick-ass writer. You can be the most taciturn, stiff person, but write wonderful comedy. It just comes from your creative genius. It comes from your creative space. So whatever you can do and whatever writing element you get into it. Find your niche. If you're a comedy writer, stick in that vein for a while. Live in it. Mold in it. And if you want to turn it on its head and go a different direction, see how well you do. That's perfectly okay because you're the one creating the universe. And I love that about writers is we create universes. We create a universe where, for example, Stan Lee. Stan Lee created a universe that millions and essentially billions of people around the world can live in and enjoy because of his work, because of his work in comics. Comics have changed the landscape of literature forever. For me, I'm such a comic book nerd. I've read, Kevin Eastman's the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle series that's out. I got big into that. Huge fan of the Predator Aliens comic books, especially the new ones. Those are really good for me. For some reason, I got really into the Hulk. Hulk has always been kind of a character that's interested and fascinated me for years because he, while he's keeping cool, he's this nerdy doctor and brilliant scientist. And when he's pissed off, he has that beast mode that he can go and he's damn near indestructible while he's pissed. You can't kill the Hulk while he's upset. It just does not happen. He just gets stronger and stronger and beastier. It just is this ongoing thing. I love it. So, the Incredible Hulk, the World Breaker Hulk, and Planet Hulk really took me down that path. Now, when I was younger, I read the Punisher War Journals that my stepfather had. I think I still have those somewhere. I wasn't, because of the Batman animated series, I got into Batman, but the comic books were not the same. So I was really kind of, I don't know, I went a different direction when it came to the comic books because as a comic book reader, I was an X-Men Uncanny fan, but when I was watching television, it was always the DC stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, the X-Men cartoon series as a kid was the shit. Ultimately awesome universe to be in and see on cartoon, and we miss a lot of those old universes. So we're starting to see a comeback. But, wherever you get your groove in writing, stay in it for a while. But it is okay to take breaks. We can get into the zone where we cut off from life for a little while. And I'm guilty of it for sure. I mean, it's even gone so far as affecting my marriage. And, as soon as it did, I was like, okay, I need to rearrange how I go about spending my time writing. And all it is a workaround in the time management piece. It's, because you still have, during the day, you still have to, give your heart and your head to your spouse, your kids, or whoever's in your home. You still have to dedicate time to them. The real work in writing, though, happens when you're by yourself or you're, essentially secluded and it's your fingertips and the keyboard, or your hand and the pen and the paper. That's where the magic is done, right? So if you can find a time, like either early in the evening. Now, writers are kind of funny characters. We operate at certain times of the day sometimes. Sometimes the middle of the day is the best time to write, because if you're home and there's nobody else there, then that's the best thing. But find your writing time too. Not only create your space, find your writing time. And whatever time that is for you, get in it and stay in it. Like, people can game for hours. I'm talking like, I'm so guilty of it. Like, I can play if I really get back into it, I can play World of Warcraft from freaking sun up to sundown, and I could stay in that zone forever because there's always something to do. The genius behind Blizzard is that there are writers creating that universe so that other people can play and enjoy. Now, to be fair, Gary Gygax kicked off that whole damn thing with Dungeons and Dragons, and he kind of riffed off of the Middle Earth of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. So it's kind of a constant riff. But at the same time, at the end of the day, ultimately, from board games to computer games have really dominated the landscape of literature for some people, because some kids only know video games. You know, they're not really recalling or cognizant of the books they read, but they will tell you the entire lore of whatever game they're playing and into, because that's what's fascinating to them. And we have to remember that even though we literature buffs may not agree all the time, but video game creators and authors are writers. They are creative writers. And if you think back to the, well, there's got to be a million games by now, but the hundreds of thousands of games that are in existence, those are writers. Those are creators. They're creative geniuses. Yes, they put up the platform in the video game realm. They made it, but the real craft is in the story craft. Like, we wouldn't have that love for Zelda without the story craft, without Hyrule, without understanding Zelda, and without understanding the lore. And that's what's beautiful about it. You know, we wouldn't have that. And then nowadays, they're literally creating whole, like, an homage to what we grew up with, you know, stories like, or movies like Wreck-It Ralph, and what was the other game one with Adam Sandler? That one was fantastic. So, I mean, the creative genius and the creative ability to write and create is everywhere. Don't get discouraged. Keep trucking. You know, if you die poor as a pauper, okay. Just think about this, though, for a second. Poe died poor and destitute, but his work has influenced film, literature, and really kick off people's love for writing. I mean, everybody has those dark moments. Everybody reads Edgar Allan Poe. People read the Call of Cthulhu. I mean, a lot of people get into those type of writers. They love horror fiction. It's just the genre they live in, they love and like. It's okay. If you find that's your niche, write in it, live in it, bathe in it, love it. You know, apply it like sunscreen. Go after it. You know, so, but now you got to look at the landscape of television now. Netflix is really going after these really fantastic television writers, because they create these very binge-worthy series like Stranger Things. You have Orange is the New Black, and those are created by a team of writers. So being a writer right now in our time in history is beautiful, because we have so many ways to go, so many avenues, so many jumping off points. So wherever you are in the writing game, stay in it. Or jump into an arena you may not even be comfortable with, but, you know, live in it for a while and see how it feels. You know, sometimes a new car feels good, you know, and but it feels kind of boxy, if you know what I mean. It's got that sterile smell, but until you make it unique in yours, it's still not the best. It's still not a new car. You got to make it unique in yours before it becomes your car, right? So think about that. And that's where I really wanted to go with the show. You know, I really wanted to remind us that Yes, we need to get back into reading, for me, definitely. But whatever got you on the journey, think about that. Relate to me. Send me an email at dwelch, so D as in Delta, W as in Whiskey, E as in Echo, L as in Lima, C as in Charlie, H as in Hotel, at, or 9627 at gmail.com. Shoot me an email. Let me know what you thought about, with what books you read that got you into writing. Where did this idea start? Where did this, epiphany start? So, and think about what your creative challenge is for the month of December with Creatacast. Write something that's Christmassy. Create new lore and legend. We need movies like the Santa Claus. We need new jingles, for crying out loud. We need those creatives to come into the woodwork and contribute to the new generation of readers. The new kids on the block, So, enjoy your holidays. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy that Barnes & Noble gift card you get. Enjoy that AMC movie theater gift card you get. And utilize it. Don't forget about them. Utilize them. Go to the movies. Have that one-in-a-lifetime experience with a film you've been dying to see. Get after it. Read that new book. Kick its ass. And then go, if you like it, go find that author's other books. Or go find similar books and get into those. Because there's not enough time in the day or in the universe to read and do everything that there is to read and do. But there's a lot of time for you. There's a lot of time for you to get behind that keyboard and create something that's worthwhile. Create something that's powerful and unique to you. And even if it's a book that's only on the shelf of your family's house, it'll someday touch somebody's soul big enough that they reach out and touch you across the universe, or utilize it to create something even more grand with your original vision. And I didn't know this. This is something I learned recently, folks. My grandfather loved to write. I have his letters, and I haven't done anything with them. I haven't done what I said I was going to do with them. I need to transcribe them, get them back on the computer, and make a book, and do so much with them that and that's definitely one of David's projects, right? So, it's okay. You can touch even just your family's life. You can publish your work in a magazine, but there are writers out there that got their start reading a book, that are getting their start today, reading possibly one of your books, one of your poems, one of your short stories. So you writers out there, you authors, just be cognizant of the descendants of your work, because it may not be now, but it could be 50, 60, 70, 100 years from now. Your work will influence somebody. It will create a world and a universe that they live in and love. So just remember, stay after it. Create, write, live, and enjoy. I love you all. And again, your submissions are needed. dwelch9627 at gmail.com. And this is the end of Creatacast show for today. Love you all. Merry Christmas.